Welcome to There Is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell, and I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I've been in business since 1994. Method to the Madness is a health and fitness podcast where I get to the meat and potatoes and things and talk about the method to the madness. In other words, why do things work or why do they not work? All right. So this podcast is brought to you by Jonathan and Lynn Gilden at the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They currently have over 275 star reviews on Zillow and over 100 million in sales between the two of them. Their goal is to provide you with the highest level of customer service, and the feedback states that they do just that. They can be reached at 386-451-2412 or at thegildengroup.com. I was working with a client of mine, it probably was Monday night, and he was talking about a client who's a friend of his who is doing a meal program, diet program with us right now, and she's on the waiting list, and she's probably next to get into the gym, and she really wants to get in the gym, and we're just full. I mean, that's the bottom line. So right now we're working on a weight loss program, but she is a friend of this client, and he was talking about that situation a little bit, meaning her, nothing but good things, and he said to her, he said, I told her the other day, I said, if you just do everything he tells you to do, you're going to lose the weight, because that was this young man's experience. So, obviously I took that as a compliment, and I want to talk a little bit about that today. So as most of you know, or hopefully you know by now, I'm writing my second book. My first book, There Is a Method to the Madness, has been published and it's been out. And my next book is called You Can't Outrun a Poor Diet, and it's all about weight loss. And so hopefully you know that. And I got my my first edits back with the publishing company. And, now I feel like a veteran on this. The first time around, I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. But this time around, I know a little bit more about how all this system works. So basically, you send the publishing company, which in my case is Gatekeeper Press, your manuscript. And mine happens to be on Word. I think they use different formats, but whatever, mine's on Word. So you simply send it to them after you've done all the other stuff, like talk to the person and figure out what you're trying to do. But the first step is send in the manuscript, and then they do their first edits, which obviously is going to be the most amount of edits. I mean, there's going to be the most error and all that good stuff. So I sent it in, and the first time around, I wasn't exactly thrilled with my first editor, but that could have been on me and my inexperience, not really knowing what to expect. But this time around, having a little more experience and also voicing some concerns, I got a really good one, and I just like her. And so, why do I like her? Because she corrected what she thought needed to be corrected. She also told me what she thought and wasn't a people pleaser, which is good, because whenever you're doing anything professional, you don't really want to work with people pleasers, people that are going to tell you what you want to hear. Obviously I want everything that I do to be the best it can be. And I feel like the first book was good and it was important. I wanted to get a lot of different writings that I've had done in the past out into one book. But this book, is a lot more intricate into being very specific to something. So, I want it to be this really great thing, because even though there's 1,000,001 weight loss books, I do think the world needs another weight loss book. So anyway, I really, really want it to be good, and I want somebody to tell me where it needs to be improved. And this is all coming back around to what I started talking about with my client's compliment. Don't worry, I'm getting there. So the fact that she's not a people pleaser, one of her, I guess, criticisms or edits that I had to go back and forth to explain to her about, she says, well, when you say here in this paragraph that if they'll just do exactly what you want them to do, they're going to lose weight, and this is her writing, you almost seem frustrated with people that won't do what you want them to do. And she basically said it almost seems like you don't want people to question anything, and that sounds a little arrogant. And I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, so again, I want feedback. I want this to be good, and I want the right message to get across. So I thought about it. I said, well, am I being a little arrogant here? Am I like speaking to specifics, and that's not fair to the reader to lump them in? And so what we did was we came up with kind of a compromise, but the compromise came from me explaining, well, I don't mean that. What I mean is that, of course, I want people to question anything that they don't understand. And of course, I do not think I'm a know-it-all. I really, really don't. I do know how to help people lose weight. I know what has worked. And then I use the science to say, yes, this is safe and effective. So I do know what works. But at the same time, I don't want it to come across like this is a closed door response, because people do have concerns. So I thought about it. We rewrote it a little bit, but ultimately, after I explained to her, and again, she's really good, and I'm glad she questioned things, and the editing format gives you a area to kind of go back and forth and write notes to each other, which is really, really kind of cool. And let me tell you, I mean, this isn't a plug for this company, but I mean, maybe it is. They're definitely not paying me. But they're really good. Like, she picked up on stuff. I'm like, wow, she's really reading every single bit of this, and not just for typographical errors, because, that's pretty easy to get nowadays. I mean, Word is going to find most of that, and they even do grammar checks. So she's reading for like content and flow and style and all that kind of stuff. So, it's pretty cool. But after I explain, well, no, I'm definitely not that way. I mean, most people would describe me as my bark is worse than my bite, because, I will come across a little strong in some areas sometimes. But if somebody gets my attention, then that'll soften a little bit. All right. So what I'm talking about here is compliance, which I think is really, really critical. We know the science of nutrition. We know the science, okay? Meaning people that have studied, went to school, taken the time to learn, know the science. And nutritional science is really cut and dry, believe it or not. It's not nearly as confusing as maybe what you see in the media. It's really, really not. It's a pretty darn simple science. And when you take a 4-year university nutrition class, which I'm pretty sure is mandatory in any of the allied health degrees, like any of them, like I think you'd almost have to major in math or science not science, in math or like physics or business to not have to take nutrition. But I'm pretty sure it's mandatory for everybody, almost everybody. Okay, so my point is this: if you take that 4-year class, all right, or I guess it's really technically even in a junior college curriculum, so a 2-year program, you pretty much have learned almost everything there is to know about nutritional science. Now, there's more stuff in the biochemistry. There's more stuff in the the food industry itself, and learning more about pollution and things like that, yes. But as far as like nutritional science, you learn pretty much what you need to learn in a semester. You might be wondering, well, why does it seem so complicated? And the answer is that's not coming from nutritional scientists or from experts. that's coming from marketing gurus who are changing it around a little bit to sell products or sell diets or sell lifestyles. That's where that's coming from. But a calorie is a calorie is a calorie, and a carb is a carb, and a protein is a protein, and a fat is a fat, and vitamins are vitamins, and minerals are minerals. And we know what these things are. And I just described macronutrients, carbohydrates, fat, protein, and water, and micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. They are what they are, and we know what they are, and we know how much people need. We know all that stuff, all right? So a big reason why people are having a hard time losing weight is, number one, they don't want it bad enough. I mean, that is the moral of the story with that. I mean, there's two reasons. Number one, they don't want it bad enough, and number two, they're not compliant with what they do now, all right? So not wanting it bad enough is the first part. You know, there's that saying, and you know, I've heard it said both ways now, and so it's kind of interesting. I listened to another podcast called The Daily Stoic, and Ryan Holiday, he's just so interesting, and I learn so much different stuff. Because me, on my own wellness plan, I love to learn. You know, it's about body, mind, and spirit. And one of the ways I continue to educate myself and learn is through podcasts and audiobooks and reading. And he's one, I listen to him every day. And, you know, his podcast has turned me on to so many different books and stuff. But anyway, I'll further explain that in a second. But the old saying, good is the enemy of great, applies here. And I'll just finish that up so I don't leave you hanging. He also then goes on to say that great is also the enemy of good when used in a different context. And that was new to me. That's why I brought him up. Flipping that is new to me. So in other words, he was kind of looking at some political stuff that's going on, and he's not one way or the other, and you know, that's good. So I'm not getting political on you here. But basically what he was talking about is, like, so many times we don't make improvements in our country because you have two sides looking for extremes. Like, they want the great plan and there's like no compromise, and then Americans kind of get screwed because they don't work on just making things better. It's got to be perfect, and if it's not perfect, it's not going to pass on one side, you know. So that's where he was applying that, and I thought about it, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's very true. I mean, if we can just get better, then that's a pretty darn good thing. But sometimes great can be the enemy of good, because if it's not perfect, well, why do it, type of thing. And I know, like, with politics, it's more of a battle, but that's how he applied it. But in this case, I'm saying good is the enemy of great. So what ends up happening is, when people lose a lot of weight, it's because they've hit a bottom. And you're going to see a lot more success with people who have, say, 50 to 100 pounds to lose, which means that they were morbidly obese, which means very unhealthy obese, with people being compliant, than you are the people that want to lose 20 pounds. I mean, does 20 pounds make a difference? Of course it does. It makes a difference on everybody, right? And it obviously makes a difference to the person, or they wouldn't bring up the fact that they want to lose 20 pounds. But here's what happens. And I deal with this, and I deal with this, and I deal with this. And it is a very frustrating thing for me. People are not going to change. People are not going to change in this regard, meaning there's statistics for a reason. So if only 10% of the people, and I just randomly made that up, I'm just trying to make a point. If only 10% of the people who want to lose 20 pounds are going to follow through on exactly what you said, lose weight, you know, then that means the 20 people that just called you that want to do that, then only 4 of them are going to do it. Get it? Or if we're using 10%, only 2. Point is, people aren't going to change. Meaning, so I have to, like, come to grips with the fact that good is the enemy of great. And when people are telling me they want to lose 20 pounds, they only want to lose it if it doesn't have to make them sacrifice too much, because they're already good, see? Because 20 pounds isn't that much weight. 20 pounds can be very hard to lose. There's no question about it, but it's not that much. In other words, it's not the difference between being morbidly obese and now getting complimented and being healthy and having all your blood work come back good. Now, 20 pounds can make your blood work better, but it's not that huge change. So is it worth it is the problem. So people don't want it bad enough, and so they're only going to be compliant until it hurts to be compliant. And it's not that different at all from substance abuse, meaning drug addiction and alcoholism. It's really the same thing. If somebody, thinks they sort of have a drinking problem, but they're not an alcoholic, and they think they have a drinking problem, mostly because maybe they're a few pounds heavy, or maybe they just think they've fallen into a bad habit, but they haven't gotten DUIs, they haven't gotten kicked out of their house, they haven't gotten arrested, they haven't lost jobs. So they're probably not an alcoholic if they say, I really think I need to improve my habits of not drinking, blah, blah, blah. Well, they might do it for a week. They might do it for 2 weeks. They might even do it for a month. But as soon as they have a bad day, or maybe a bad week, or maybe worse, or maybe circumstances, friends show up and they're having a great time, well, it's off, it's over. So they're going to start drinking again because the cost of drinking isn't that bad for them. It might not be great because they put on a few pounds, they don't sleep as good, they don't feel as good about themselves, who knows what the reasoning might be. But because the cost of drinking isn't that bad, they don't have the motivation to stop. But the alcoholic or the drug addict, let's just keep it to alcohol. So the alcoholic who really has had their shit kicked from alcohol, meaning they've gotten a DUI or DUIs, they've gotten arrested, they've lost jobs, they've lost spouses, they've lost partners. Well, that cost of drinking's pretty bad, and so as they say in recovery, then the cost of drinking is far more problematic than the gain of drinking, and that is true. So they don't want to go back to that. So when those temptations come or those bad days come, they think, man, it really wasn't good last time. So they weren't good. They weren't okay. They were bad when drinking. It was not a good time. Mentally, physically, spiritually, they were in the gutter. So they don't want to go back to that. So therefore, there's enough motivation that they don't. It's not that different with food. As a matter of fact, I know people who struggle with food addictions, and it's very, very hard for them because it's not like you can just say, I'm going to quit food. All right? But that's more of in the department of eating disorder. Matter of fact, it is in the department of an eating disorder. So really what I'm talking about is that person who wants to lose 20 pounds, but as soon as it becomes a little more convenient not to lose 20 pounds, they don't follow that compliant plan. And as a trainer, that is very frustrating. And again, people are not going to change. The percentages are going to stay the percentages. So, as a trainer, I have to come up with better solutions how to handle that. And sometimes it's a matter of, you give them maybe one shot, and then if they don't follow it 100% compliance, then you say, look, I'm not going to waste my time sending you meal plans that you do half-assed, because as my client said, if you listen to every bit of it, there is a method to the madness. There is a reason why it is spelled out the way it is spelled out. It does work. If you do listen to it, you will get the results. And you're listening to this and you're going, well, of course, but you're not on my end and see that, well, of course should mean of course for everybody. But the excuses you get with the people who just don't want it bad enough, and as trainers, as professionals in allied health, and I have physician friends who say the same thing, they get very, very frustrated. If people will just say, man, I know that'll help me, I know that'll work, but I'm just not willing to do that. Man, that's great. That's called honest communication. And I had clients like that in the past that have just said that. And so we pushed it aside and we worked on other things because they just weren't ready to commit. And that's fine. You're not wasting anybody's time. But compliance means that you're going to do what you're supposed to do at the moment in time. All right? So in sports psychology, when it comes to this, we have two terms: adherence and compliance. Adherence means you're doing it for the long haul. So in other words, if your workout schedule says you're supposed to work out 3 times a week for the whole month and then do your cardio the other 3 days during the week for the whole month, you adhere to that program. So you're great with your adherence, and that's great. That's consistency. Compliance means basically you're able to take orders. You do what you're supposed to do. You follow directions. Now, when you have a client that's got both of that in them, and we do have some, you're going to get results, you see? And you see how, like, sitting in my chair, how you'd be like, well, yeah, that makes sense. How do you not? How do you not? If you're doing what you're supposed to do adherently, right, for the long haul, and you're following orders, and the person's been in business since 1994, so they know what they're doing, and you trust them or you wouldn't have signed up and swiped your card, why wouldn't you get results? And why wouldn't you do it? And again, this is, really just directed at this whole weight loss thing, good being the enemy of great, because the answer is you don't want it bad enough. Like, you want to get in better shape, and I get it. And yes, you can get in better shape and not take off that 20 pounds. That's kind of the point. And I do think in our country we have a big problem with moderation, and I've spoken about this before. We are we're not big on moderation, are we? Like, if you're like a Democrat, a liberal Democrat, you are as far to the left as humanly possible. Again, I'm generalizing. And if you're far to the right, conservative, then you're as far to the right as humanly possible. That just seems like where the divide is nowadays. It's like, and I think it just, for some reason, maybe it's just the part of where we are, but we're like that with everything. So we're either not eating at all, and there's eating disorders, which I am not making fun of. What I'm pointing out is there is a problem. What is the problem? So we have that extreme. We have the extreme with fitness. So we have plenty of fitness models out there, and underwear models, and perfect bodies, and fit, and 3-hour a day workout people, and all that kind of stuff. And then we have obesity. And from what I understand from my European friends, it's not like that across the ocean so much. It's not like that. So we tend to really, really struggle with moderation. So I'm not saying the washboard abs is the epitome of health and fitness. If somebody's genetically inclined to have that. I tend to have a leaner midsection and all that. But I will tell you this, I do not go to extremes to maintain that. I love to exercise. My exercise usually consists of about an hour to 90 minutes a day. Some days a little bit less, but that's what I like to do because I feel good, and I split it all up. And I eat a nice moderate diet. I eat a lot of calories. I try to eat healthy foods, and yes, I have a few treats here or there. So I do not go to extremes to keep it. I'm very blessed and lucky to have a good metabolism that way. And yes, I work hard, but I absolutely do not go to the extremes. And I absolutely believe that 100%. The epitome really of health and fitness and wellness is more somebody that's of good weight, not necessarily ripped, because when people are shredded, a lot of times they have hormonal issues, especially if they're going to extremes to maintain that level of leanness. They have a lot of endocrine system problems, which are your hormones, which is your system that produces and secretes your hormones. They have a lot of issues that way, whether it be thyroid or depression or bone density. That's not not necessarily, not at all. That is not healthy if you're going to extremes to maintain that. So being absolutely shredded, no, that's not the epitome of health and fitness and wellness. The epitome is being of good body weight, being strong, having a strong cardiovascular system, which you would know with your blood pressure and your resting heart rate, and whether or not you have the endurance to complete tasks or run and walk or bike or that kind of stuff. To have a good lipid profile, so low LDL cholesterols, moderately high HDL cholesterols, low triglycerides, normal blood sugar, resting glucose, fasting glucose under 100. So like good blood pressure, I already stated that. So like that's fitness and health and wellness. That's like what we want. That's not necessarily extreme by any means. It's just simply not obese, and it's not too skinny due to anorexia, and it's not too shredded due to starving yourself to maintain a certain look. It's in between. All right. So it's okay to necessarily, like, let's say you're a 150-pound female and you're 5'7", 5'8", and that puts your BMI, which that stands for body mass index. And no, it's not the greatest of barometers, but you know what? It's not bad either. It gets punished a little bit. We already know that BMI does not work for the athletic population, true, but it's not bad for the non-athletic population. So I'm just going to use it, and I'm going to, here for the record, this is what Rob says about BMI. It is not great, but it's not awful either. It's decent. So let's say it puts you at your BMI is overweight at that weight I described. So yeah, you might need to lose 20 pounds to put you in a healthier BMI. And by the way, speaking of BMI, here's something interesting for you. And then I'll get back on the subject. But they did a study on BMI, and they found that people that were of a normal BMI, which is not basic. Why do I say basically? Come on, slap me. Where's my editor? That's superfluous words. I don't need to say it. All right? There, I just yelled at myself. A BMI of 18.6 to 24.9 is considered normal, right? Guess what? Below that is not as healthy as being normal. And they've shown that with risk factors for health. So there you go. Extreme skinny is not good. So really it'd be great for everybody to strive. Again, don't yell at me about the BMI. I get it. Body composition's better. All right? I'm just trying to make a point. Everybody should strive to be good. Can you imagine our country if we all got good and we weren't so damn extreme all the time and everything? Well, this is the area I can help you with. So losing that 20 pounds if you're a 150-pound person, and to get to a normal BMI, you need to be at 130. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I'm 100% for it. And I think it's important. And I think your whole family will thank you. And I think the medical staff at where you go to see your physician will thank you, because it is healthier. It absolutely is healthier to do it. Studies have shown it. But you've got to want it bad enough. You've got to be compliant. Because at 150, nobody's calling you fatty. Nobody's calling you lard bucket. And I say these terms because one of my thinner clients who's a psychiatrist, we joke around all the time and, say those kind of things because we're not supposed to say those kind of things anymore, right? I mean, we've all gotten too sensitive. And of course, we should not call anybody morbidly obese any kind of derogatory name like that. No, that is not going to help anybody, and it certainly doesn't help us or them. But the point is, 30 years ago, somebody might have called you some names like that, right? So nobody's going to call you names if you're 20 pounds overweight. And I'm not saying they should, but my point is, because you're not getting your feelings hurt a little bit because nobody's pointing it out, then it's not, that bad to you. You might be looking at it like, well, my jeans are a little tight. And I'm not saying that's good, and I know you're not happy with it because I get hit all the time from clients that say, I want to lose about 20 pounds. I'm like, okay, I'll send you a meal plan. And then they follow it for a week or right away they stop. Well, can I do this instead? Well, you know what? I'm going to do it 5 days out of the week. The other 2 days, I'm going to do this. I mean, that's the reality of what really happens. And as my nice little client said, and he's hard on himself right now because he's fallen off the wagon. He knows he got to get back to it. But the point is he knows how to get back to it. So when he said, if you just follow everything, you'll lose the weight, because it's true. So why don't we like to do that? Is it because, why do we not like to do it? I hope I said adequately. Is it because we like to control too much? Is it because we don't want it bad enough? I don't know. But it doesn't have to be forever. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, do it for a month. I can remember when I did my very first bodybuilding show when I was 27 years old. I was not a nutritional expert yet. And yes, I am one now. I knew a lot, but I didn't know enough. And I didn't know enough about the bodybuilding world, and I really wanted to do well. So I trusted a plan that I found. And I was very anal about it, OCD about it, so I followed it to a T. Now, honestly, looking back on it, and I've told this story to other people, it's the reason, other than the fact that I don't like how animals are treated in animal processing plants. Like the modern day way that we farm foods, I'm just not for at all. So that's been a big part of my last 10 years, yes. But prior to that, I didn't eat a lot of chicken because I was so freaking sick of chicken. Because the meal plan I was following had me eating chicken 5 times a day, and I did not deviate. And I was working as a physical therapist technician, a PT tech at a place. So I would bring my little cooler with these little plates all made because I meal prepped. Even back then, 30 years ago, I meal prepped. And I'd have my little 6 ounces of chicken cut up on the plate with a scoop of rice and like a half a cup of broccoli or whatever it was. And I literally did that 4 times a day, okay? In the morning, I did a cup of oatmeal with a banana and 3 egg whites every day. And for dinner, I got a treat. I didn't have the chicken again. I had 6 ounces of orange roughy. Yes, it had to be orange roughy. Why? I have no idea. Maybe because back then bodybuilders were too cheap to buy good fish and they just told everybody it worked. I don't know. But that's what I had. With a sweet potato and like a little bit of romaine with lemon juice on it. Okay? And I did that for 10 weeks. And I did not deviate until, thankfully, the week of competition came and I had to carb load and then carb deplete, which was brutal. Brutal. But that's not the point. I think I was almost relieved to have brutal to get away from the boredom of the 9 weeks that I've been doing. I didn't deviate. Why? I wanted it bad enough. It's just that simple. I wanted it. Like, I've talked about before that growing up, being a little bit overweight in junior high school, I was called fat boy, lard bucket, lard ass, whatever. Kids can be mean, right? So, like, I had this thing to prove as I got up on stage. I wanted to be that person that, like, wasn't that person. Like, it was like I needed to prove it to people and prove it to myself. So I had this, like, deep desire. And I didn't want to mess it up. It meant something to me. So I started a very muscular, lean 190 pounds at almost 6 foot of height. I've shrunk a little. So I was muscular. I was not fat when I started leaning down. I was a big boy. I was muscular. When I stepped up on stage 10 weeks later, I was 160 pounds. Now, looking back on it as an expert, I'd say maybe a little too lean, too thin, but I still did really well. I finished third in the middleweights, and yes, I was able to put that old insecurity to rest for the most part and say, you know what? Here I am, people. It felt really, really good. So yes, it worked. And why? Because I was compliant. I believed that this is what I needed to do. And standing up there on that stage in basically my swim trunks, if you've seen bodybuilders, they're tighty whities, but these happen to be red. They're tighty reddies. I didn't want to embarrass myself. So I did everything I had to do, and it worked. So if you want to get the most out of a meal plan, when you follow it, you need to follow it to a T. And if you're not ready, just don't do it. Just don't do it. I mean, it's that simple. Don't waste anybody's time. So as far as like my own stress with it, it just comes down to that. Because, I could be guilty of being a people pleaser with that. Oh, yeah, you want a meal plan? Sure, let's do this, do that. In reality, I need to really just say, well, hold on a second. So it's only going to work if you really do it. And I really only want to send it if you're committed to doing it. And if you're not, don't waste my time, don't waste your time. When you're ready, you'll know. But hopefully, it doesn't get to the point where that 20 pounds you need to lose becomes 40 pounds. Because it could. It could. Things happen, right? Get depressed. Get into a bad rut. Start eating too much. So it's, I almost said it's easier to handle it when it's 20. But, maybe it's not. I mean, technically it is. It should be. But maybe the motivation's not there. So how do you get motivated to really get what you want? How do you do that? Or do you really not want it? Is somebody else telling you need to lose the weight? These are questions I'm leaving with you. Because if you already feel like you're healthy enough, not perfect, but enough, maybe you are. Maybe you are. But I do know this. If you follow the plan to a T, it'll work. Absolutely. Speaking of food, let me thank our second sponsor, Istanbul Turkish Mediterranean Cuisine. Great salads, great vegetarian dishes, great food in general. They are located at 488 South Young Street, Ormond Beach, Florida, 32174. You can call in an order, 386-492-7100. Until next time, be Max Fit, be Max Well.